You know what I really like about Destiny? Guns. You know what Destiny needs more of? That's right, Crucible maps. Welcome back, Guardians, to another TDT video. I'm your humble host, Misum777. If you're unfamiliar with this series, essentially what we do is we get exotic ideas from the stuff that we've come up with as having some game design experience, game design background, as well as ideas that you guys have come up with in the comment section. In case you aren't aware, maybe this is your first time seeing one of these videos, I try to go through and like and heart every single comment that I see. Absolutely every single one from the exotic idea list. And if you're subscribed to the channel, you might get your idea featured in the upcoming video. So if you have an idea for an exotic and you've always wished you wanted to have some type of really cool idea, something well thought out, drop it in the comments because I probably will read it and you might get it featured. Sometimes the idea doesn't even have to be fully fleshed out. As you'll see, this exotic idea, the featured exotic at the end of this video, is actually just sort of like an offhanded comment like, hey, this would be cool if we had this. And it was one of those moments of, oh yes, that would be really, really cool. So anyway, let's get on with it here. I always start with the weapon because it causes the most controversy in the comment section, just so you guys can get a thermometer of where my head's at as a designer. This is something you guys have been begging for so long, so please stop asking me to make something designed off of this idea. These are dual wield sidearms. Yep, dual wielded weapons, something that I've kind of hesitated on for a while because I think Destiny is much better as a precision based game. Ironically, I know like Fellwinter's is like the #1 Crucible used weapon right now, but this exotic kinetic sidearm is a 450 RPM, so the rapid fire, fully automatic frame, just like you see with the Fool's Remedy, if you're familiar with it. They are called the One versus Many. And the flavor text for this reads, we need guns. Lots of guns. By the way, there are, I believe, I'll put a number on screen because I don't remember it off the top of my head while I'm recording this, but there are that many references in this video. If you can catch all of them, I will pin your comment. So let's talk about the perks of this one because obviously that will be what makes or breaks this weapon. The intrinsic perk is called the Dilemma. This weapon is dual wielded. Press whatever your right trigger is to fire the right weapon and whatever your left trigger is to fire the left weapon. Right off the bat, we can see that this is very basic, like very Call of Duty-ish, if that makes sense. Essentially what these do is that if you press the aim down sights button, it will fire the left weapon. If you press the normal button, it will fire the right one. You can fire both of them at the same time. The magazine for each of these is 21, so it has a maximum capacity of 42. They're also each reloaded individually, and obviously you can't ADS with them. So when I was designing this one, I was trying to think, what is the power fantasy, if you're familiar with that term? What's the thing that people are going for when they dual wield weapons? Like, what's the cool thing that people are trying to envision themselves being? And here's the exotic perk. Bullet time. Improved in-air accuracy, slide distance, and slower fall speed. Kills concuss nearby enemies. The idea for this weapon is that it is supposed to be a run and gun sort of trick shot style of weapon. Now, in case you aren't familiar with what the reference is, and if you do, you'll know exactly what I'm getting at here. The whole idea is to be a trench-coated badass running around the map and just spraying people down. Obviously, the thing that makes this nice is that it really encourages that idea. You get improved in-air accuracy, which means you can jump around and be very mobile. You can also slide a little bit further to help get around the map a little bit easier, or, slide in and out of cover a little bit easier, and you get slower fall speeds with that in-air accuracy. So if you're wondering what this would be like, think of this like Top Tree Dawn, essentially baked into this weapon. So if you start to fire, it sort of essentially triggered Top Tree Dawn's perk, where you kind of like fire and float for a little bit, maybe for not as long because that would be a little bit annoying, but the whole idea is that you can tear through a group of enemies comfortably and be able to maintain a high damage output. I want to make sure that these are at least capable of competing with shotguns in PvP, and I think this is a great way to do it, as they are sort of like a more restricted, higher damage version of something like an SMG or obviously sidearms. Let me know what you think of this one. I think this one would be really, really cool, especially with the idea of the bullet time perk. All right, let's roll forward to our exotic armors for this week. Starting off our exotics for armor is the Warlock. We have this helmet called the Iceborn Wrath. As you can see, this is obviously a very nice looking exotic helmet. By the way, a lot of people ask me, where do you get your art from? A lot of the times I just Google images. That's just where I get it from. It's kind of funny. Armor is not one of those things that gets published very much, ironically. It's difficult to find a really good, like, in the style of Destiny piece of armor to make an exotic out of, because a lot of the times it's all either a different style or people just don't make armor art for some reason. I don't know why. I'm super happy to find this, but anyway. The flavor text for this reads, I intend to scour humanity from this planet. The exotic perk for this is called Deep Freeze. Frozen targets stay slowed after thawing out. Killing frozen targets grants a portion of health. The idea behind this is I really want this to feel like a area of control style of Warlock, which is what Warlock's really good for. And I also wanted to give them a few tools to be able to access slows in the game, because right now, Warlocks have the hardest time actually getting direct access to slows. All of their aspects and abilities generally play more towards just straight freezing a target, which is great. But if they ever did want to play a more slow, heavy build, they don't really have a whole lot of tools for that. So making the target stay slowed after thawing out, I'm thinking essentially half stack of slow. So I believe we're going from a base 10 to a base 100 system. So it'd be 50 coming into this next new patch. And let's say that slow lasts for 2 seconds. So nothing too terribly long, because obviously you could refreeze a target pretty consistently. And we want to make sure that the Warlocks aren't able to just essentially keep somebody in limbo for an extended period of time. And of course, the big thing about this is that when you get kills on those frozen targets, it gets you a portion of your health back. The idea for PvE is that this could be a great way to manage and get benefit from your stasis abilities and be able to survive and really take care of large groups of adds. In PvP, of course, being able to get access to slows can be really, really good. Freezing and then having to deal with the slow after is basically a death sentence. So I think because Warlocks, all of their slows are generally pretty damn short, such as, the Penumbral Blast is only 2 seconds. Cold Snap, which is probably Warlock's best grenade, is only 2 seconds as well. So I think this is a good way to give Warlocks that ability without making them too ridiculous. Let me know what you think of this one here, because I know this is probably a little bit dangerous for some of you, so let me know what you think. Next up, we have an exotic hunter helmet called the Accretion Verdict. This idea was around the idea of two things. First and foremost, Tether or Shadow Shot in PvP is probably one of the worst supers in the game. And now I know a lot of people, that's going to piss a lot of people off. Frankly, I don't care, because you can just try to take a Tether into most engagements and it will at best delay a target. You have to hit them directly in order to make it work. So I wanted to come up with an idea that would make Tether feel a little bit more powerful when you actually fire it. So that's the idea, that's the design behind this. The flavor text for this reads, Feel the Gravity. For the exotic perk, this is called the Law of Attraction. Shadow shots will pull targets towards it. Bow kills grant super energy, and that's the second design that I mentioned earlier. The second principle I wanted to kind of build into is, what would it take for Guardians to actually respect bows? Because personally, if you've ever seen some of my other videos, I think bows are incredibly good. I think bows are one of the strongest weapon archetypes in the game, specifically for PvP. PvE is obviously, they've got a pretty well-defined meta. What would it take to get Guardians to actually start using bows? Well, what if we gave them a little bit of super energy every time they got a bow kill? Obviously, for PvE, this would be fantastic, as you would be able to get your Shadow Shot up more often, and because it pulls targets towards the center of it, essentially like gravity, it pulls them towards that center, it makes it very easy for things to follow up with it. For PvP, this would make the Shadow Shot feel a lot more viable as a tool to be able to completely ignore and shut something down. I'm even thinking that this could even be something that triggers the effect while it's flying through the air. Like, imagine if you fired a Shadow Shot across the map and targets would kind of get jerked towards it a little bit if, they're near the projectiles it's flying by, sort of disorientating them, nothing that's too crazy, and maybe even allowing them to get hit a little bit easier if they happen to be close enough to where the Shadow Shot is coming from. Obviously, we'd have to see how that works out in game, but I love this idea, and I think encouraging more bow usage in the game is something that's good. I don't think we have a lot of stuff that really encourages bows right now, and we've got some pretty cool bows. Like, we've got some pretty cool exotic bows. So I think this exotic would be super cool to put in your bow-heavy builds in order to make them a lot more viable. Let me know what you think, though. Last for our exotics, for our armors, is the Titan. This is the Sleetfall Barron. This is an exotic Titan chestplate. I could not find anything that wasn't a full body set, so you get to experience the full body set. Congratulations. The flavor text for this reads, Before his shining light, his dark clouds went past. raining ice and fire. The idea I'm going for this one here is essentially like the Celestial Nighthawk for Glacial Titan. The exotic perk is called Compromise. Stasis crystals shatter rather than melt. Changes your glacial quake into a single slam that will freeze a large area. So you know when you go to slam down with your glacial quake and it sends out like those 3 stasis crystals that kind of spawn up and create those pillars at the end of it? Imagine that, but 3 times the range and in a circular radius from wherever you popped it from, allowing you to shut down an absolute massive area, freezing any target solid. Maybe for PvP we could make this only last 2 seconds in order to not make it too crazy, because obviously you could hit some people from some ridiculous angles, but I think even if it's the full 5 seconds, essentially using your super for just a single one and done shutdown super, and it requires you to run an exotic, I think is okay. Like, you guys have to let me know what you think of this one. Obviously, the cool thing about this is that it sort of plays into itself, right? It will cause those stasis crystals to spawn in a much larger and much wider area, and then when those go away, they all explode. It almost makes me reminiscent of Bangalore's ult in Apex Legends, where it just covers a massive area, and then those become essentially ticking time bombs that you want to get away from. Let me know what you think of this one. I really like this idea, and it would be so cool to pop this thing down in the middle of a map and just freeze absolutely everything in the area and cause some big damage to it. Obviously in PvE, this is a great tool for just freezing anything in your immediate engagement for a brief period of time in order for your team to best capitalize on it. For this week's featured exotic, it is from, drumroll, Justin Ortiz. Now, if there ever was any question as to whether or not you have to put in a full flavor text and lore to get your idea featured, not necessarily, because Justin just had a really simple, really good idea that he didn't really even have that much work for, but I absolutely love this idea, and I think this would be an excellent idea for an exotic. His idea is that it's a heavy trace rifle, so a heavy weapon trace rifle that's similar to Godzilla's atomic breath. Now, if that's not appropriate timing right now, I'm not sure what is. Not only did we have the vote about whether or not we wanted to be dinosaurs or, movie monsters, but there's obviously a bunch of stuff happening in movies right now in general for like Godzilla versus King Kong and all this other stuff, so the timing for this is absolutely fantastic. The actual weapon is called, what I've come up with from his idea, is called the Atomizer. It is obviously a heavy weapon trace rifle. You can see the rate of fire still stays the same, so it's 1,000 rounds per minute, but the impact is absolutely massive. Huge impact. I'm thinking if you're wanting to get an idea for what this would be similar to, think of this like Chaos Reach, but as a heavy is the idea here, right? So the flavor text for this reads, "Men quake before the terror of their unleashed fury." Obviously, the perks are gonna have to be something that lives up to the power fantasy of essentially having a Godzilla cannon, and I don't think they disappoint. The intrinsic perk is called Atomic Reactor. Fires a high damage continuous beam that leaves lingering fields of arc energy where it lands. Now, I don't want to step on the toes of the Thousand Voices, right? Because Thousand Voices obviously has its thing that it does, and I don't want to, do what that does, but just differently. So where this is different as opposed to what the Thousand Voices does, Thousand Voices will superheat the area, and then essentially wherever the bursts land, it'll explode. Instead of exploding, these just leave just essentially like a void wall where it lands, essentially like an AoE, just kind of lingers there for a few seconds after it lands, allowing it to generally cause damage to the area for a little bit longer as opposed to, erupting all in one big go. The exotic perk, the built-in exotic perk to this is called From the Depths. Continuous damage, shield pierces, staggers, and overloads champions. Doing so costs 1/10 of your super. So the idea behind this is I wanted to go for sort of like Borealis or the Hard Light, but for the champion mods. Instead of it being able to specialize what type of element it wants to shoot, allowing you to swap it around, this focuses on being able to just handle any type of champion. Now, obviously, the drawback to that needs to be pretty damn strong because, why in the world would you take anything else? And obviously, the drawback to this is that it costs 1/10 of your super. So if you are staggering champions with this thing, you essentially are forfeiting your super, or you have to make that decision for yourself. We could obviously turn up and down how much super energy this ends up costing somebody. Obviously, the maximum of this being like, 50% of your super energy, but I think that's too much. I think 1/10 is a good spot to be because, again, you're having to give up your exotics elsewhere. You could go more specialized and not have to cost your super energy, but let me know what you think of this one for PvE people at home because I don't do that much PvE. Would this be an auto lock for you? Would you have to consider this? You know, maybe I don't really think it's worth the 1/10. Let me know, because I'm genuinely curious. I don't think I completely understand how powerful this might end up being. So give me an idea if I'm off my rocker here. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the stuff. This is a lot of fun to make. It takes a ton of work. So if you like this stuff, help us out, subscribe. It really, really does mean the world to us. And of course, if you do subscribe and you leave a comment, I will check it out and I'll read your comment and I'll see if it's good enough to be in the next week's video, if it can be the featured exotic. Just like Justin Ortiz here, it doesn't have to be fully fleshed out. If you just have a decent idea, I might just take it and run with it. So drop them down in the comment section. Share this video around if you like these types of videos. It really does help. Bless your faces and deuces.